Moses is a strong name. If I close my eyes, I can see Charlton Heston raising his staff to the sky, and walls of water miraculously rise from the floor of the Red Sea. And if I let my mind wander, I can feel the yellow church pew cushions where I sat and learn to associate the name of Moses with God's power, authority, and most of all, Exodus. Moses is a unique name to my white European ears, but it's pretty common in Africa. I might picture 40 days and nights wandering in the desert, or the handwriting of God on those stone tablets, or the burning bush, all of this rich and colorful story. But Moses is, I don't know, it's probably like James or John is for a lot of us. It's actually a pretty common name. Today on The Soul of Life, I speak with Moses Kushaba. Moses grew up in Uganda and has a rich and colorful story of his own.
So we had a civil war during that time when I was born, and it was also a rainy season. And so my family was fleeing, going, to another area. And so they didn't know what to do because all the valleys were flooded. So what they did, they made a basket, put me in the basket and pushed me on water as they were crossing there. So that's how they named me Moses.
We talk about Ibram Kendi's How to Be Anti-Racist and how hard it is to actually practice this. Being anti-racist, according to Kendi, doesn't come naturally. It's impossible to be human and not be racist. And according to him and others that talk about this, the trap that we fall into is believing that the goal is to somehow deny our racism, when in fact hiding it from ourselves and others is by definition hiding our most human and imperfect parts while pretending we don't have it. So of course it spreads unchecked, just like coronavirus is spreading unchecked in many parts of the US. So in this episode, Moses and I practice what I think Kendi in his How to Be Anti-Racist work is inviting us to do, actually naming racist ideas we have struggled with.
I think there has always been this inherent fear of the angry black man.
Naming racist ideas we have struggled with. In a place that matters, like in front of other people where you have something to lose. I hope it inspires you to speak honestly to others about race, racist ideas that you actually have. I'll admit I was a bit nervous about this, but it's exhilarating to think of you and Kendi and others who are providing leadership, important spiritual leadership on this with me, that you're out there doing this with me. So yeah, I'm counting on you. And I'm ready, and I hope you're ready. If we're going to the River Jordan, we are going to go deep, full immersion. The only reason I know Moses is because he fled Uganda in the 2000s. He experienced violence in his family. His grandfather was killed by one of the regimes there. Moses was eventually granted asylum. But his story takes a few twists and turns, and I want to prepare you and ask you to be open to the whole story, to Moses. Surviving traumatic events takes time to process and heal, and I'm sure some of these chapters that we'll hear today Moses talk about are still being written. So I ask for your openness. You'll hear Moses speak about some of this, but other parts I've gathered and gleaned from public reporting about his story. It's not something he really wanted to rehash. Being gay in Uganda is dangerous. Now, Moses was from a wealthy family, but his parents, both of them, died from HIV/AIDS when he was just a teenager. And as the oldest of 6 siblings, a lot of responsibility fell on Moses.
If I can help raise my siblings so that we actually don't die,
Yeah, In order to not be exiled from his family and get kicked out of school, he hid his sexual identity and gave in to pressure to be married and look normal. He had children. Keep in mind, this was during a time where the regime in Uganda was passing bills, literally passing bills that criminalized homosexuality, but called for the punishment of that crime to be death. And to this day, Uganda is still not a safe place for gay people. Hunting down gay people was really happening in Uganda when Moses was outed on national television and accused of being a dangerous predator. This accusation that Moses experienced is not a new one. It's been recycled over and over again. The idea that gay people harm children somehow more than straight people. It's one of the most common homophobic legends used to justify violence against gay, lesbian, trans, queer, and intersex people. There's no factual basis for this. It's homophobia and paranoia. But a tabloid in Uganda ran a front page story with Moses' picture, telling others he was a monster. To some people in the LGBTQI community in the US, Moses became an icon of courage, but I don't think he sees himself as a hero at all. People close to Moses were forced to share what they knew about him when this story ran in the tabloids. They were forced to take sides.
It was so ironic because I was receiving praise from here. People were like, oh my God, you're a courageous person. Oh my God, thank you for putting this to light. Oh, thank you for the good work. You're helping people. On the other side of the world, it was like, how dare you? How dare you do this to us? How dare you put us through this? How dare you put your family through this?
People openly talked about all of his sexual experiences since he was a boy. So, okay, just try to imagine that for a moment and how you'd feel in that position. Front page news, all of your sexual experiences. They gossiped about this imbroglio of sex that he and another boy inaugurated at his boarding school. So Moses got out in front of that story and he told a lot of details about his earliest sexual experiences. Things that a straight person would never have to share with anyone. And he told this to a US reporter. If Moses was being pushed out of the closet, he was not just going to stumble out. It was like, I don't know, a bit of jujitsu. He kind of said, if you're pushing fire at me, I'm going to use it to blast off. Moses is a pretty smart guy. He made friends in Washington, D.C. He had been denied asylum at first, but he appealed and won his asylum and joined the U.S. Army as a medic. One drill instructor confronted him for smiling and laughing through the grueling workouts.
People ask me about my experience in Iraq. I'm like, I think that was the best time of my life.
Moses kept smiling. After his tour in Iraq, Moses studied social work and is now finishing his PhD in psychology. He's been a healer and psychotherapist for many years, and I hope you'll learn something from our attempt to bring knowledge as healers of the mind and heart together in the messy work of anti-racism.
If we stop putting in our own input and injecting our own feelings and our own theories, then we will let the healing process actually flow.
I'm Keith Miller, and my podcast, The Soul of Life, is here to help you remember who you really are. I'll bring together people who have gotten off their treadmills. I'll have conversations with athletes, musicians, doctors, scientists, healers, and entrepreneurs to discuss the fascinating edges of our knowledge in neurobiology, psychology, and physics. This is The Soul of Life. My guest is Moses Kushaba, and it's a real pleasure to have you here, Moses. We are going to be talking about race, racism, the immigrant story in the United States, your story. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Keith.
You're welcome. I've gotten the I've had the pleasure of getting to know you over the last few months, working together professionally in our practice of psychotherapy. And so you are a clinical social worker, and you're also pursuing your clinical degree in psychology. So you're a registered psychologist. And I wanted to say first off that how thrilled I am, and my kids and my family get a chuckle out of this. Whenever your name comes up on my phone, I say to them, "Look, Moses is calling." I just get a thrill of saying, like, I got to talk to Moses right now. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's so sweet. That's so sweet.
It's
that name is powerful in its way.
It is for me, and for someone with my background. The name of Moses, it carries tremendous authority.
Thank you. And actually, they gave me that name. It was purposeful. It wasn't just that, oh, we're just giving this guy the word Moses. So just a little bit, briefly, the background of Moses. So we had a civil war during that time when I was born, and it was also a rainy season. And so my family was fleeing, going, to another area. And so they didn't know what to do because all the valleys were flooded. So what they did, they made a basket, put me in the basket, and pushed me on water as they were crossing there. So that's how they named me Moses. So
I mean, that is the real deal. That is Moses. It's really phenomenal. You were raised in Uganda. Tell me what it was like living in Uganda. Today we're going to talk about Ibram Kendi. We're going to talk about anti-racism, and I can't wait to do this with you. It's exciting to talk about these topics. They're so I want to say that they're so interesting, and I want to bring this conversation forward for everyone because I think it can be invigorating to talk about these things. It doesn't have to be stressful. It doesn't have to be on tiptoes and on eggshells that we walk around these issues. We can talk about them and laugh about them, and we can cry about them and so forth. So I'm thrilled to do this. Tell me about your story in Uganda, coming from Uganda, and what it was like coming to the United States. I know you had a tour in Iraq as an army medic, and so there's a lot to get through here.
Yes.
How did this all start off?
Yeah, so growing up, I never ever dreamed of joining the military. That was never me. That even now people look at me and they're like, "You joined the military? Like you don't seem to be that person who can actually be in the military." And I'm like, "Yeah, you're right, but things change." Things change. I never thought I would have that kind of strength, that mental agility to just be in the military, because I always looked at the military in my country and I was like, this is not my thing, and the fact that in 1970, 79, 78, my maternal grandfather was killed by Idi Amin, the president by that time. And so I never had any desire to join the military. It was just awful. But, losing my parents at an early age and struggling, with school and all that, and struggling with that identity, trying to figure out who I was, I there came to that point where I felt like I wasn't me. So when I was along the way, people came in my life and helped me. My dad's friends came along and helped me with school, and I will forever be grateful for that. But when I finished college, I was given an opportunity to teach at the university where I graduated, and there was always that constant pressure of, oh, you have to get married, or you have to do this, and that rumor of, he's gay, we started coming up, and so I had to get married, and we had to do all these weddings and all that stuff, and it was a bad period. So that was during the wars in Iraq. So the Department of Defense was hiring people from English speaking countries. And so I was like, you know what? Yeah, maybe this would be a chance for me to get out of the country.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so,
So
yeah, that's what I did.
literally it was the outreach, if you want to call it, of the recruiting office of the U.S. Army in Uganda that was what spoke to you, and you saw that as an opportunity.
Yes, I mean, they were recruiting, and I felt it was an opportunity to just get out and just have some fresh air.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
to breathe. And so when people ask me about my experience in Iraq, I'm like, I think that was the best time of my life.
Wow. It represented so much for you, right?
It represented so much for me.
Right. Right.
Yes,
And
it represented so much for me.
you lived during a civil war in Uganda, and you experienced the effects of violence, I imagine, and also the effects, the devastating effects of AIDS, HIV, and AIDS.
Yes.
In Africa, but in Uganda, your parents died from HIV, AIDS.
Yes.
What was that like? How old were you?
This was the early, HIV AIDS was really rampant in Uganda in the, mid 80s, late 80s and early 90s. It was really bad. There was no medication. People were just dying like dogs. But then the government came up with this strategy, this information communication education strategy of targeting youth, targeting kids in schools, boarding schools. I think it was great. So basically, kids go to boarding school. So I grew up in boarding school. Mm-hmm. So you had this education, in the schools. We used to do plays, and just to get that understanding of what the gravity of this pandemic, and then take that information, first of all, to help ourselves as kids growing up be informed, so that we don't make any crazy decisions, but also take that back to our communities,
right,
back to our parents. So that strategy worked well. So I was really so involved in the plays, in dramas, and all that stuff at school. I was, yeah.
Well,
but
and
it just dawned on me when my parents happened to be victims. I think that's what kind of killed me.
Yeah. It must have had a devastating impact on you.
Yes. Yeah. So then I was like, okay, what is it that I can do to at least help kids? Basically, my dad died when I was finishing elementary school, and then my mom died when I was in junior school. Mm-hmm. I was in my third year of junior school. So I decided I needed the skills to help kids my age, kids, to kind of help them not fall into their parents' traps. Because you had this pandemic wiping away all middle-aged adults. Literally all young and middle-aged adults all were going and leaving these kids behind to their grandparents.
Right. And we think that, obviously we are alarmed and concerned about coronavirus pandemic globally and also here in our country.
Yeah.
It just doesn't compare to the kind of devastation of HIV AIDS, right? And we forget also that it's a virus as unpredictable and as deadly. I mean, there are different levels of mortality, obviously, but
right,
how devastating it was just to a whole generation of people. And then add to the fact that my understanding of the politics involved in a lot of African, not all, but many African or some African countries where similar to how today there's misinformation and there is scapegoating, blaming people who are trying to get information out about the virus, blaming them, making up rumors that they're causing it, and persecuting, in fact.
Yes.
So it sounds like you came out of this experience of tragedy and said, I need and I want to. It sounds like it was part of the fabric of who you were to want to do more for others.
Yes, I just wanted, my hope was if I can help one person, but also more importantly, as the firstborn in our family, and we were 6 in our family, if I can be an example, if I can help raise my siblings so that we actually don't die, I think that was my goal.
And it's pretty big goal to have, right? When we think about what we ask, my wife is a early elementary education, we have young kids, we ask our children what do they want to do when they grow up, what do they want to be, and you're saying one of my goals was to survive and make sure my family survived.
Yes and I kept asking myself, what is it that I can do? What kind of skills? So when back home in the education system, we tend to choose our careers when we are finishing junior high school. So when you go to high school, you at least know what you want to be. And so I decided I want to be a social worker when I was in high school. And so I did courses specifically for that. And so when I graduated high school, I went to do social work.
Yeah. Tell me about there's a chapter in your story about immigrating to the United States where you began to speak out against the horrific persecution against the LGBTQ community in Uganda.
Yes.
And then you were targeted viciously, publicly, ruthlessly, and slandered publicly.
Yes.
For being outspoken. What was that like?
So I leave Uganda and go to Iraq. And so during that time we had white evangelicals, you won't believe this, white evangelicals from here, United States, going to Uganda, going to our Congress and influencing those people to start putting laws on the books that were anti-homosexuality.
Right.
So those bills, so basically, of course that their teachings landed on this soft ground because our cultures, much as they never wanted to talk about, in our culture, people never talked about stuff like this. People were there, they see them, but it was not like, oh my God, I have never seen this. No, it was there, people were there and they would see them, but okay. But because, again, we go back to colonialism, we were colonized. And when our constitutions were being drafted, these are some of the laws that were put in our constitution.
Right.
So we already had this stuff in there in our laws, but this was just kind of fuel that.
There was a system. We're going to talk about systematic racism, but you're talking colonialism codified a way of oppressing people and codifying racist ideas, including and also hateful ideas, anti-gay ideas, and suppressing the rights of people.
Yes. So basically these guys came over in 2007, 2008. And so I was like, you know what, now I need to go. So I left, went to Iraq. I come back. It was really bad. People were being outed. They were being put in the newspapers. I mean, it was horrible. It was a horrible situation. And so I was like, I really can't. I can't be in this country.
Right.
So I migrated here. And then I was out kind of publicly on national television. And I think that is, yeah, that made it worse. So, of course, I was in the newspapers. I mean, they said horrible stuff about me. Um, it was a very tough situation. It was a very...
What would you say to somebody who's in that situation here? They may be in a because this is, I think we have to say that this is not something that has gone away, even though it has gotten better. Life is better here.
It has not gone away. It has not gone away. It was so ironic because I was receiving praise from here. People were like, oh my God, you know, you're a courageous person. Oh my God, thank you for putting this to light. Oh, thank you for the good work. You're helping people. On the other side of the world, it was like, how dare you? How dare you do this to us? How dare you put us through this? How dare you put your family through this? So it was horrible. And so I was like, okay, I really can't. I don't know. But part of me was like, okay, you are in a space where you can be yourself. You are in a place where you can thrive. You are in a space where no one from there is just going to come here and grab you and drag you and take you back. So I was like, you know what? I can cut off communication. I don't have to talk to anyone. I don't have to do anything, and I'll be fine. But then, of course, I always feared for my family. My wife was there, my kids were there. And so I was like, okay, what is going to happen to them? So I think I was just torn in between. Do I keep communicating? Do I just cut off the communication? You know, but I was fortunate. My immediate family, my wife stayed. She was like, I'm not going anywhere. My siblings were like, you know, this is our brother. You know, we don't think he's different from who he's always been. He's always been our rock. And so that kept me going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot we could talk about. I think it speaks to people who are struggling now, and it speaks to people who are you know, looking to learn from others, young people who are, you know, thankfully having the opportunity to see that there are they have the freedom to really find out who they are.
Yes.
And people, I think, can learn from others who have come from places and come from maybe more culturally restrictive places where they have suffered or have had to eliminate or hide parts of who they are. And so hopefully this can be encouraging to people in that regard.
Yeah, I think part of our role as you know, in my case, part of my role, I think, just speaking out, if I can help one person and show them that, hey, you being outed or going through some kind of traumatic situations, that's not the end of it all. You can, you know, still, you know, believe in yourself, and at one point you'll come back on the other side as triumphant.
Right.
So it's not all over.
Right,
you know?
right. And it's so common, as we know in this work, that people who feel traumatized or victimized or feel shamed, especially publicly shamed, those who are shamed or feel humiliated and that they don't belong to the people that they're with, it's so easy for them to think that they're the only ones. It's like the scarlet letter. And people, you know, end up thinking that everyone must know that they're bad. And, you know, this is it's not true. That there's thankfully there's ways now for people to see these conversations, to know that you're not alone, and that if you're going through something, chances are there are other people out there that know what that's like, and that there's a story to be written that's waiting,
Absolutely.
and you have really, I think, Moses, have that, that you're bringing that gift, I think, because of your story and what you're doing, what you've done with your life. I want to talk about Ibram Kendi. It's something I think a lot of people are talking about. I think it's past time that people are talking about racism and how to be anti-racist. That's his book, How to Be Anti-Racist. He also has the book Stamped from the Beginning, The Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America, which is eye-opening. It's tragically, to me, it reads like a tragedy. Looking at this catalog of things, and you mentioned colonialism, and it's so helpful to have this work by Kendi out there. And I want to talk about anti-racism. One of his ideas is that I think he's calling out people, saying that, people who hide behind this idea of saying that they're not a racist. Well, somebody says Black Lives Matter, and the other person says, well, all lives matter.
Right.
And then the person, the Black Lives Matter person says, well, that's racist. And then the All Lives Matter person says, I'm not racist. I love people of color. I empathize with their story and with their pain. I'm not racist. All lives matter. And so Kendi, it seems to me, and I just want to point out, we're not experts on anti-racism. We are experts at helping people change behavior. So
right.
I think this has this has an intersection here, the psychology of this and some of the work that Kendi's doing. I understand that it's challenging, and as a white person who would consider myself anti-racist, I feel very humbled by what he's saying. Very, very humbled, in fact. And I wanted to talk about how hard this is, how hard it is to actually be anti-racist, how vulnerable it is. I would like to sit here and say, Moses, I'm trained as a social worker. I've worked around in diverse communities my entire life. I would like to just simply say I'm not racist, and then just have lunch and talk about football or something.
Right.
And in fact, if I follow this trail, and what Kendi is asking us to do is say, wait a minute, no, it's not possible to be human and not be racist. It's not possible, he says. You have to find, like when alcoholism, people, like, very famously, we know in treatment of alcoholism, the beginning of that treatment is just acknowledging that you drink too much. Yeah. Just acknowledge it. You don't even have to do anything. Just say, I drink too much.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, to me, I want to just come out and say, I am racist. I do have racist thoughts, and I that I struggle with, and I think we all should struggle with finding those thoughts and making sure they don't become beliefs.
Absolutely. And everybody is racist in their own way. And when I was thinking about that, I was like, okay, I don't want people listening to this coming up and saying, oh, these mental health professionals are saying they are racist. Who can we go? Who can go to or trust? No, I think it's a human instinct. I think we are all human beings, and we all breathe, and that is natural. And I think it's normal now. It's been normalized based on our experiences. Just like I told you about my African culture, Ankara culture. That was a long time ago. So now there are all these other racist things going on, anti-homosexuality and all that stuff. It's there. People will always be fighting. But of course, when you come here, and there is also that bit of Africans who are immigrants and African Americans. So you come here, the way white people or African Americans, everybody who sees us, they see us differently. I have, when I am with my African American friends and we've done this experience. We meet a white person. Once they hear my accent, the way they will treat me will be completely different from how they treat the other person.
Say more about that.
Yeah, there is no fear with me because I am not looking for anything. I am not, maybe I never suffered on their hands. So there is nothing to worry about. But with the other person, they see this angry person.
So Black Americans carry, you're saying, it sounds like it's just common knowledge that to be African, to actually to be identified as African, right, with an accent, it sort of gives you a pass with white people?
Yes, it gives us a pass because we are not looked at as any threat.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not a threat.
I mean, and I want to say what I appreciate, like, I think, because, I think to go back to something earlier I said about walking on eggshells around this.
Right.
That we can talk about this in ways that we can laugh about this, but obviously this is not a laughing matter, right? It is like
it is not a laughing matter, but also we need some humor in it as we are talking about it, as we are acknowledging it. We need some humor, but also, of course, with some level of seriousness when we are talking about it.
Why is that so important, do you think? Why do we need the humor also?
Because everything has been so bad. Everything has been so bad. You don't want to laugh. When you laugh at something, oh my God, how dare you laugh? And I'll just give you one example. I joined the military. And I go to the military, basic training. I am a happy person. Overall, I am a happy person. So I get there, and day one, they are getting us to do exercises. It was just horrible. They are yelling at us. And amidst all that, I was smiling, I was laughing, so my sergeant comes to me and he's like, why are you laughing? Is this something to be laughed? I'm like, you know what? The day if I stopped laughing, you would be running away. And so in order to make myself get through this, I need some humor. I need some laughter. I need to look at this as something that, you know what? This is one thing that I really need to go through in life, and I will be fine.
Did he leave you alone after that?
He left me alone. So they ended up calling me Smiley. That was my nickname, and that helped me go through basic training.
I could think of far worse nicknames that that's not bad. If you get out of basic training with that nickname, that's not too bad.
It wasn't too bad, but there was nothing they could do about it. And people were crying. People felt like they were suffering. It was the end of their life. No, with me, that was not the attitude.
Right.
So we need to come to this with not that, because if that angry person continues to be an angry person, how are we going to approach them?
Right. It starts with us. Right. It starts with us. Yeah.
I am not going to be angry. I need this person to come to me looking at someone who has a sense of, oh, this person is not mad. I thought he was mad about me, but he's willing to listen. He's willing to sit there and make jokes and listen and talk about this stuff. Oh, okay, I think I can trust this person.
Right. And it's one of the things we know from listening hours and hours and hours in our work that we do, right? Really, we're listeners, right? That is our work as healers, and we listen.
Yeah,
and
we're listeners.
We get to know more than anyone else. I mean, I think we have this privilege. I want to say it's sort of like we're priests. I mean, it used to be the priests, and still is clergy are the listeners as well. They hear people's confessions. They hear the deepest, darkest, and most difficult parts of the soul.
Yeah.
And we know from all of that listening that when you hear, even if you're sitting across from someone who is an oppressor and is someone who is in other people's eyes and maybe their own eyes, they are evil, or they embody evil power. Somehow they have power and authority and they're using it to hurt people. When you listen to their story, if you can
Yes.
have the safety, first of all, and then the courage to be able to hear their story, you will find deep, deep pain in everyone, and especially people who are the perpetrators.
Yes.
That this, as we know, is the cycle of violence. It doesn't just get cooked up out of nothing. It's because of violence that happened to them and
Absolutely.
trauma.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you know this story, but behind me, I have Bob Ross. I have the bobblehead. I have a couple bobbleheads. And one of them is Bob Ross. You're listening to the Soul of Life podcast with me, Keith Miller. Every week I bring you a new episode that hopefully inspires you to reflect more on who you are and who you want to be in this rapidly changing world. If this time we share together moves you somehow closer to who you are or lights up parts of you that have been unplugged, I want to hear from you. And please share the love. Take a moment to find the Soul of Life podcast in the social media where you hang out on iTunes, Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, and let me know who you are. And he is my son, who's a teenager, just loves Bob Ross, as a lot of people do. It's sort of it's almost like it's like a cult thing. That's like people follow the painter Bob Ross, and he was on my father used to turn Bob Ross on PBS, public television, in the 80s when I was growing up, and Saturday mornings we would watch Bob Ross. Have a very clear memory I have with my dad, and so he's still popular. My son loves him, and I didn't know this until recently that Bob Ross was a drill instructor in the Air Force.
Wow.
And when you see this man smiling, and his whole affect, there's almost like a halo around him in his artistic life, and because he literally just embodies this joy. And he said part of his story, and I'll put the link up if people are interested to this, because there was an I think it was an NPR story on him. He when he came out of the military, he said, "I'm never going to raise my voice in anger again." And then so he found a way. He used art as a tool. Everyone needs a tool. Everyone needs some way to.
Yes.
We need something where our mind is meant to not be alone. We need some tool or other people to deal with that anger. It's not meant to be kept.
And that's what we offer as mental health professionals.
Right.
How are we able to create a safe space for these people who feel that no one has ever listened to them?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
How do we create that space that this person is going to feel comfortable and be vulnerable?
Right.
In this space.
Right. Well, speaking of vulnerability, I want to try to create this space between you and I, but also because obviously people are listening to this. A large number of people may be listening to this, and I want to create the space. I want to go back to Kendi's anti-racism thinking in his training, his teaching about this, because I think it requires a little bit of practice, and so I want to practice it here with you, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to follow up and say, because I did mention, I do have racist thoughts, and I want to say what that is, what they have been specifically, and I want to also say that these are thoughts that this is not easy to say. This is not something I would say without the context of this conversation to somebody, because it can be easily misunderstood. So it is vulnerable. But I want to take that risk in this conversation because I think that's what is required of us. And Kendi talks about this idea of confession, and those people who have a religious experience or with the practice of confession realize how powerful it is to be able to confess things that are not right, are not whole. And so one of the thoughts, and I cannot remember, this is a tragic thing in and of itself, because I cannot remember which Black teenager was shot by police running away. There have been so many.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually had this thought, and I couldn't remember, so I tried to look up some of the details of that case. And the Google results for, if you put in Black unarmed teenager shot running from police, if you put that phrase into Google, you will get pages of unique news stories. So anyway, that's aside. That's just got to take a breath about that. That is that's in and of itself, it's worth pausing there. But so one of these cases, I cannot remember which one. The first thought that I had, Moses, was, why would you be so stupid to run away from police when they're telling you to stop? And I don't think I'd like to think that I had the thought that this person did not deserve to be shot by the police and killed. But I have to admit that it bordered on like, well, it wasn't his fault, and so, I don't hold on to that belief. I do not believe it is the fault of somebody, that the police have to take responsibility for their training and the way they're responding. But so I want to just say that, that was something I had to name myself and say, that is a racist thought, that this person who is Black, why would they be so stupid and run from the police? And when I had a guest on the Soul of Life show, previous episode, he is a Black man, and he described how his family, and I don't need to say that he is an educated Black man. I do not need to say that, right? But again, a racist idea, right? Another racist idea. But he said, I never knew this about him. I would have thought, oh, well, because you are so educated and you are so successful and you are economically in a position of privilege, that he would not have to deal with fearing the police. And he said, in fact, in my family, because we've been so harassed by the police, his children have been subject to, in fact, there's litigation around an arrest that was made unwarranted by his family. He described routine traffic stop type of thing, harassed by the police. He said, there's no reason for us to have any business with the police if we can help it. And so it really, I wasn't able to make that distinction when and so this is what happens. I guess I wonder what your reaction is and where that lands for you.
African Americans, of course, always have this, growing up, they have always been taught, they have that experience of slavery. And so they have always known it's submission, it's this, you need to do this, you need to do this. I don't know what white people have always told their kids, like growing up. I don't know, their story, but of course there is that fear, of this white person thinking, okay, what I did, what my great-great-grandparents did to these Black people, maybe there is some kind of revenge. And these are the automatic thoughts that we get, that we have, everybody.
Well, and even if the automatic thought is something along the lines, I read a book called The Sports Gene. And I won't get into this here. I hope to have this guest on the show, the author of The Sports Gene, because he talks about scientifically genetic differences in race. Of course, there's genetic differences in race.
Yeah.
But even if you have the thought that this Black man is more violent because Black people are more violent, Black men are more violent, wake up.
Yes.
And see it as a racist thought and ask yourself, why do you have that thought?
Yes. Why? Yes. Why? We need to ask ourselves, of course, why. But then there is this, hey, that submission and stupidity in that case, that those automatic thoughts could be from our history.
Right. That's right.
These are the inherent expectation that this person has to submit to authority without question or face the consequences. And so, do I judge you? Absolutely not. Can other people judge you? Absolutely yes, if they listen to what you said. But I think my case, when it comes to that question of judgment, I would say no, I actually don't judge you, but applaud you for your willingness to be vulnerable and share your story. But then, okay, moving forward, what do we have to do?
Right.
Because it's not going to change like instantly. Yeah, you're not going to change. Just like those automatic thoughts come because of our experiences, we have to go back and unlearn these behaviors, unlearn these, reteach ourselves to be able to acknowledge our thoughts and think about our thoughts.
Right, and you're reminding me of such an important thing here, the next step, right? Because it's wonderful if people can have conversations and they stop. Barack Obama famously, I can't even remember what it was, but he got into this argument like in the first week with Louis Henry Gates. I forget what that was about. The police. The police had either given a citation to Henry Louis Gates. And because he was maybe yelling at them or something. I don't want to speak out of school about that case. But anyway, Barack Obama said something publicly like, well, he was similar to what I said. Like, well, why would you do something so stupid like to the police? Like, why would you provoke the police like that? And it caused a big stir, and he invited Henry Louis Gates to the White House. They had a beer on the South Lawn or something like that. Conversation, we are at a point right now, and Kendi makes this very clear, Black Lives Matter makes this very clear. We're at a point where nice conversations like this are not enough, and they are not fair. It's not fair to simply say, well, we had a nice conversation. I feel better now. I don't hate you. We don't hate each other. And now I'm going to go to my white, privileged world, and you are going to your world where you exist outside of that privilege in some way, and I'm not going to do anything about changing that.
Right. And that's why every time there is tension and we show how our feelings are, everybody runs back to their hiding places where they feel safe.
Right.
Yeah. It's who would want to be in this kind of confrontational situation at all times.
Right. It's understandable why we retreat, right, to our safe places, because it is I think it is very unnatural to be anti-racist. Personally, when I read this book as a therapist, I said to myself, yeah, I get it. I understand why it is so hard. And I think we have to begin understanding. I'm not saying we have to give passes to people and say it's so hard, so don't worry about it. No, it's so hard, meaning then we need more support.
Yes.
We need more eyeballs. We need more ears. We need more energy in this, because it is a heavy lift to go into the middle. I'm sorry, rather just to get out of the middle. Kendi is kind of saying, look, the middle, saying that you're just not racist. Like, well, I'm not racist because whatever. He's saying, no, that's not okay. You've got to get out of that middling kind of nowhere land and actually say, I am anti-racist. And so this leads us to the other question I wanted to talk about today. Some people will know from the TV series, The Watchmen, that where reparations were depicted fictionally in that story as having happened several administrations ago. And also Richard Nixon gets reelected. I mean, there's other things that happen. Spoiler alert, sorry. But that's sort of the backstory of The Watchmen. And reparations and white supremacy are major themes in that series. And in fact, what happens, and this is a spoiler alert, but there is basically it leads to another civil war because the United States gave reparations to descendants of enslaved people, and then that caused a white supremacy backlash in the country. And so I wonder, so I personally support reparations. I absolutely, as a healer,
Right.
a healer, I believe that institutionally there are things, it's not enough sometimes to just say, well, we had a good therapy session and we talked about everything and everything's better. It's not enough. Sometimes we have to act as a social worker. We know this. We have to say, well, okay, so what kind of environment are you going home to?
Right.
Who controls the money in this family? Are we changing the power dynamics of the things that led to the trauma? Are we substantially intervening from a health perspective as health providers like we are? And so that's just part of our care for people, as we intervene at the structural level. So reparations make sense to me, but I also understand the fear that may be out there. What's your sense about that? Do you have any fear? Because there's also this, whether it's a trope or a theme, of Black people asking for too much. What I've heard from some of my Black friends,
right,
is that the fear is they want to pass. In other words, they want to fit in as white, or they want to basically not rock the boat, and they don't want to ask for too much. They don't want to be seen as demanding anything from white people.
Right. Yeah, and I think it goes back to that point where I said, Black people just want to be left alone.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know, even if there was these reparations, like how much do you think you can pay them? How much would be enough?
It's a good question, right? It's a difficult question.
There is nothing. I mean, you can never say there is enough when you actually had people die on those boats, on those ships, bringing them here. People who used to die here, people you used to sell. These were human beings. You're literally selling them as goods. Like, how much can you pay them?
I know. It almost sounds like you're saying that really, can you solve a spiritual problem with a monetary solution?
Yeah.
It's a very good question, and yet at the same time, it seems like even if it's symbolic, I think those words mean things. When you mentioned the legislation that the Congress in Uganda had passed, the words matter. So the way our Constitution is written matters. The way the laws are interpreted matter. The way signs are either put up or not put up in this country during Jim Crow, that mattered. It sent a message to people, and the words of our leader, of course, saying that they're not going to condemn white supremacy, that matters. So I just wonder, even in Germany, others can speak to this more than I could about the history of Germany post-Holocaust, post-World War II. But my understanding is that there was fairly swift regime change in government, and that government enacted reforms that were radically reparative in some way, that they institutionalized some sort of payments and
yes, yeah, there were payments, and there was reintegration, and somehow communities started coming back together. And that's totally understandable. I think here that systematic racism is still what is haunting people. When you look at the income inequalities, if the African Americans were also given a chance to get out and work and go to banks, be able to be eligible to go to the banks and get loans, or let me just give you just a little bit of my example. So I graduate grad school with my master's in social work. I was in the military, and I had other, students that I was going with. We were all in the same class. We all graduated together with a master's in social work, same school. We submitted in our applications for commissioning. They got commissioned. I did not. For some reason, this person looked at my name and was like, oh no, your bachelor's degree is from Africa, so we really cannot commission you.
Right. So you've experienced this.
Yes. So then they tell me, oh, maybe if you can wait until you get your license, then we don't have to think or consider your bachelor's. I'm like, but how did I end up in grad school?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How did I just magically end up in grad school?
Right.
And so that eventually robbed me, because you know this, once you finish that degree, in order to get a license, you have to spend 2 years doing internship. And then you have to, apply to take the test.
Right.
Those are 2.5 years. Right. How much money did I lose?
Right. And it strikes me that the fact is you weren't given, because it doesn't sound like you were given, you were not engaged in a conversation. They could ask a straightforward question, say, tell us about your training in Africa. Tell us about the university you went to in Africa.
There was no need for that, because I already had the transcripts that were evaluated.
I see. So even, okay, I see. So it was very blatant in that case.
It was just blatant.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so they robbed me of these 3 years and I was pissed off. And that's actually how I ended up going back to school. And I decided, you know what, let me do a doctorate. Let me go back to school and get my doctorate. And
right. Yeah. I want to stay with kind of a thorny part of this discussion. If you can give me some feedback on this, because as a white person who has experienced sometimes a person of color saying to them directly that I've somehow experienced your privilege. In other words, when you're called out, when a person is called out. I have this thing, by the way, and you'll have to tell me how this actually sounds, because I worry that it sounds like a white guy saying he doesn't want to really do the hard work, right? And it could actually be that. But, when somebody says, I've experienced this as white privilege, and I want to sort of say, well, I'm feeling kind of called out. I'm missing something from you. Can you call me into, what is it you are wanting me to experience with you, as opposed to just saying, well, you're just using your white privilege, right? I think we can throw around people, and I see this happening, and I'm afraid that if the discussion only stays at this sort of confrontational level, where somebody says, well, that's racism and that's racism and you're being racist, and it's a lot of this cancel culture type of thing, and then canceling the cancel culture, and then it's like we're just getting into we are doing it. We can do it we can, fighting fire with fire. Yes. It just leads to more fire.
It does. And those are the judgmental human instincts that we all have based on our experiences. Definitely when someone looks at you and you're talking to them, automatically they'll be like, oh, okay, he's already okay. Like, what is it that he, Right. And sometimes I'll acknowledge this, and this is a place to be vulnerable. Sometimes I will have, like when I used to work in California, and I used to have Silicon Valley white people coming to my office. I'm like, okay, automatically I'm thinking, you are rich, you have everything, what are you looking for?
Wow.
It's that judgment.
Wow. Do you mean to say that
Yes.
that you have felt that sometimes you would judge yourself as though you don't have something to offer a person of that value, quote unquote?
Yes, of that part. Yeah, because it's like, okay, what is it that you're looking for? Like, what is it that I can offer you,
Mm-hmm.
me as Moses?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question.
Right.
Hopefully you
What is it that I can offer you?
hopefully you
But
found the answer.
then, yeah, the more you kind of relax and
Yeah.
sit
Yeah.
and put away all that crazy, judgmental stains, and just be in the moment and listen to this person,
Right.
you get to know where they're coming from. And most times it's not pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not about the money. It's not about all that. It just comes to how this person is feeling.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. My wife said something very helpful to me that, because we have this reaction, I think it's visceral, and I think we need to name this as therapists and people who work with trauma, that when we are, if we're a white person or if we're anybody who's being, who is being called out, let's say, or being told that they're acting inappropriately, let's just leave it at that.
Right.
There's a natural defense mechanism, right? Our bodies will feel some adrenaline. We may feel heat in our face. We may feel our hands, either more sensation,
Tingling, yes.
all of that, sick in our stomach. So that is the feeling of fear.
Yep.
And or potentially shame, but it's the fight or flight response.
Fight or
dorsal
freeze.
vagal, right?
Yep.
The freeze response. And so, Brene Brown talks a lot about this, how to, there's lots of resources out there for people to recognize what a shame spiral looks like, because just chemically it lasts for oftentimes hours or days, that once we have had that humiliating feeling or the fear of humiliation, it takes a while to recover. And there are very predictable things that we do, which is namely we stop listening.
Right.
And we will typically get defensive or kind of freeze, as you point out. We'll just sort of like shut down or deny,
Yes.
like, no, that didn't happen. No, or just not call the person back who's like, they really need to deal with this because they feel offended, and you're just you're in a freeze response. So very typical. And my wife said to me, she said, look, this isn't about finding an answer in any particular case. If somebody feels like you have, they experienced your privilege or they experienced some racism in a way that hurt them, this isn't about finding an answer for everyone's or all of your interactions with people. This is just about like asking a question: what could this person have felt?
Right.
That's all. And then it made it much simpler. It's like, oh, my job is not to be right. My job is not to have the answer. It's just like, what can I learn?
Right.
And what is this person? What do they need?
Right.
So anyway, that helped me relax.
Yeah, and I think we usually made it clear to our patients that we are actually not providing answers. We really don't have the answers, but they actually do have the answers with them. Our job is just kind of give them a different perspective and just help them figure out answers to their questions. And so if we stop putting in our own input and injecting our own feelings and our own whatever theories, then we will let the healing process actually flow so smoothly, because then that person will feel they are very invested and they are finding out answers on their own.
Yeah. Just being able to say not knowing and being uncertain is okay.
Yeah.
That is okay. It's like fertilizer. It gives space to grow.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we've covered a lot of things. I guess, are there things that you think people should know about practices? Certainly people out there who are not therapists, they're business people, they're professionals, they're medical professionals, they're leaders, entrepreneurs, people with authority and power to influence other people in their positions. What are the things you think that we can do as leaders, and what should leaders be doing? I know Kendi makes the point of saying, look, the racial diversity statements, which were made very popularly in the 1980s in corporate America, HR boardrooms, he's actually quite, he has a kind of visceral response. I heard him say, they should be torn up. He just says, they should be torn up and replaced with statements that are specific and say, here's what a racist thought is. Here's what a racist behavior and action is, and here's how we're defining it in our corporate handbook. And here's what an anti-racist thought is. Here's what an anti-racist behavior. We expect to see this, and we do not expect to see this. And here's what's going to happen if we see this. Right. If we see racist behavior. What do you think people need to hear in positions of leadership about being, if we want to use the word anti-racist, but being a change maker?
That's why we need more diversity trainings. Yeah. We need these diversity trainings in these corporations, because now we are just talking on a micro level. Those diversity trainings need to be happening on the macro level, because that's where big things happen. That's where change happens.
Right.
So
like maybe everyone, if you're going to be a member of Congress or the House of Representatives,
yes,
you must go through this basic training, right?
The basic training, that basic training, and just put away your own judgmental stances and just bring your open heart in this training, acknowledging that things have not been good, but something good can come out of this training, and you bringing yourself in it, wholeheartedly coming in and being vulnerable. Right. Good things come out of our vulnerabilities as long as we acknowledge them.
Yeah, it's well said, Moses. We see, I'm grateful to see education curriculums in early education, in even like pre-K and K, like the way developmental psychology has been adopted. And then, even my kids are coming back saying, their health classes are talking about emotions, and they're talking about how the brain works and how the stress response. And this, it's so good to hear that, because, like you said so many times, like it starts at the very beginning.
At the very beginning. My kids come home and they start meditation. I'm like, this is good. They did meditation exercises at home.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, it is fantastic.
It's great. Well, it's such a great pleasure to speak with you and see you. And I hope that people get something from this and share it with others, and let us know how they have been impacted by this conversation today.
Thank you, Keith.
Thanks for listening to The Soul of Life. This is Keith Miller. Oh, and don't forget, please leave a thumbs up or a like for this episode wherever you're listening, so that others like you may find the soul of life. I mean, really, it's not every day you get to share the soul of life with someone. Okay, so you can post a comment or question on souloflifeshow.com. I'd love to hear from you. And please subscribe now to get the next episode. I look forward to sharing more of my soul of life with you.
I like it, and it's not harsh to my eardrum.
All right, I will go.